So this is our last session for this track today in this room. And our speaker is Mauricio. He came all the way from Australia for this session. He's also a little bit famous as a LinkedIn influencer with 15,000 followers for SAP because he's an enthusiastic open source contributor. And his session is about best practice with CAP Node.js. So you will see, and especially operations part of the DevOps. So the stage is yours, Mauricio.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. So last session of the day, between you and the drinks. So let's try to keep that short. Allow some time for questions as well. We will see some tips and some advices on how we should configure our CAP applications, especially when deployed. So we do all these hello worlds or simple applications, and we see that it runs smoothly in our development environment, in our local machine. But when we deploy, we may have some issues, or we may see some weird stuff, and we don't know how to deal with that, or we don't know the reason for that. I will try to start with the simplest one, which is using a package. So this is for Node.js, no Java, right? So, sorry, yeah, not a big fan. So, package lock. So this is the simplest one, and for some reason, some people git ignore this guy here. I don't know why, but they do. And what happens is, if we git ignore, when we deploy or when we run our application in CI/CD pipelines in our DevOps operation, there is no way to guarantee that my build is always going to be the same. Every time it might be different. So every time my dependencies might change. Although I have declared the dependencies my package.json, it doesn't guarantee what's going to run when I build in my CI/CD or when I build and deploy in my BTP environment, regardless whether it's Cloud Foundry or Kyma. So this one makes that consistency, reproducible, reduce a little bit of the risk, so we don't have all that issues with packages that have been updated with some weird stuff that we don't want in our code, and we don't know why it's ending up in our application. So when running in CI/CD pipelines, don't run or don't execute your npm install, use CI, because this is going to guarantee that you are going to use your package lock rather than your package file. CI doesn't stand for continuous integration in this case, it's clean install. Okay, the other one is you should say which Node.js you're going to run in your application, because when you deploy to BTP, it's always going to use whatever is the default or whatever is the flavor of the jus, right? So if you don't say that you are running Node.js 18, 20, try to use LTS versions, right? If you don't say what you want to run, there's no way that you or guarantee what you're going to have on BTP. So for example, in my local machine, I'm using Node 22. I'm playing around with some new APIs. I'm using glob sync, whatever. Then I deploy to BTP. It doesn't work because in BTP, the default version now might be 18, might be 20. It's different, not the one that I have. So I need to specify, I need to tell what I want when I deploy my application. Then maybe I say what is the version, but I go to the detail, to the minor patch level, and then I may have some other issues because I may say that I want to run 18.16.1, but that version is too old. It's not available in BTP anymore because BTP uses a build pack to build your applications in general for Cloud Foundry, regardless of the language. And then you may see some problems because that version is not available and it's trying to get exactly that version. However, if you have to specify, for example, you have some old application running on Node 16 for whatever reason, and you don't want to change to a newer version because some old APIs that you are still using that have been deprecated, but you want to make the application run, you can change the build pack that you're going to use. So rather than using the default one available in BTP, that's going to get updated from time to time with newer runtime versions, with newer things, you can say, okay, I want to use that specific version because that specific version contains whatever I need from my application. So it might have the right Node.js version, it might have the right Java version, whatever I need, I can say that's the build pack that I want to use, right? This is another one that I see all the time. People don't use package.json for the DB deployer. They just ignore that. You have the folder, you have your CDS views, you may have some HDI deploy or whatever, but you don't have, or people usually don't have a package.json. So when you build your application, build is going to read your folder, it's going to read the files. If it's missing, it's going to generate a generic deploy for you, a generic package.json for the DB folder or the DB deployer. The problem with that is the same as using the, or not using the package lock, right? You may have a version that you don't want. And we had that case last year that was very famous because somebody has done some things that they shouldn't do on SAP HDI deploy. And everybody that didn't have a package.json with a proper lock for the DB folder, they were getting the latest version. And the latest version had an issue, and then everybody was just trying to figure out what was happening when they deployed to BTP. So all the chains that people were trying to deploy their HANA chains or HANA tables, whatever, it was breaking. Didn't work. Everybody was scrambling, trying to understand, and it was just that package with some issues inside the latest version, and people were just using whatever is the default one, right? So use package.json and the lock one for DB folder as well. Another one, people just use defaults for everything, right? So people usually, it's just easier to use defaults. By default, you get some memory and some disk space allocated to your application. But I'm cheap, I don't want to use the default because default is 1 GB. And I may not have a lot of quota to use in my company. I don't want to spend a lot of money with some Hello World applications. I don't need 1 GB memory for a very simple to-do list, right? So I just say, I just need 500, I need just 100, maybe I just need 24 megabytes. It doesn't matter. You just say whatever you want. And then there's all these environment variable that you can set, optimize memory. This is Cloud Foundry specific. So this is going to set that flag in Node.js to understand what is the memory that you set to your container. And it's going to configure your garbage collector in Node.js. So it avoids some out-of-memory issues that you may have from time to time if you just use the default one. This is a no-brainer. If you have more than one user in your application, you should be using outscaling, right? We are in the cloud. You don't need to buy a new server. You don't need to get people connecting cables and different things, right? So you just need to have that configuration, quite simple, straightforward, activate the service in BTP. The service itself, it's free. You are going to pay for the instances that you are going to increase, right? So you can configure whether you want based on CPU, memory, and scales up, down automatically. You don't need people to listen or to monitor the traffic in your application. And then, oh, we need more instances here. We need more instances there. You just set the configuration and it works. So it avoids wasting resources. So you don't need to over provision whatever you need. And you don't need to under provision as well. So you can try to find the right balance for the application. Then rather than having one application with 1 GB or 10 GB, you can have multiple applications with less memory. And this might be better in terms of handling all the requests that are going to go into your application, right? This is a little bit tricky and a little bit more technical. So again, defaults, right? By default, your Cloud Foundry is going to build using the build package, and the start command or the entry point for the container that's going to be built is going to be npm start. That's the default one. You don't need to do anything. That's the default. The problem is the first one. NPM is going to be one process, parent process, and your application or whatever is the command that you set inside your npm start in the package JSON, that is going to be a child inside that process. So again, I'm cheap. I don't want to waste resources. I want to optimize my applications. I don't want to process. I just need one. So I just say, that's the command that I want to execute. I don't need npm executing and spinning up things for me. I know what I need and I know what to do, right? That's the first thing. Might be just, yeah, too much. I don't need this. I don't bother. It's just tiny process, footprint tiny. I don't care. However, when you use npm in a container, you are going to have an issue when you try to kill that instance, because the signals that you send to the application to or to the instance to destroy the instance, to stop the instance, they are just ignored because npm as is the parent and your process is the node, is the child. That npm process is going to swallow the signal, is not going to pass to the child, and the application is going to be closed or destroyed, and you are not going to be able to do what we call graceful shutdown. So this guy means when I close my application, I may have database connections, I may have HTTP connections open, I may have a lot of things happening in my application that I want to close them down. I want to finish and stop all the process before killing my application, right? If I just go straight down and kill without sending the signal to the application, it's just destroyed. So all the open connections that I have, they're going to be just hanging around for a while. And if you have low resources or low volume resources or not consuming a lot of things from, let's say, your HANA or other databases, it might not be a problem because you're not going to starve the resources from those applications, right? But if you have a lot of applications, or even if your application has a lot of open connections with your HANA, you may starve your HANA, you may block the HANA to get new connections because you're consuming all the resources inside that application. You killed the application, but they are still hanging the open connections. If you go into the code and look into the CDS or the CDS package, you are going to find a method called shutdown, and that shutdown kills or closes Express, closes everything else inside your CAP application. But again, if you don't have the signal being sent to the application, it's going to be ignored. So the Express, all the incoming requests, rather than the users getting a nice HTTP status saying, we are closing, we're not accepting any new requests, they are going to get a 200 whatever, or the requests are going to be accepted, but they're going to be killed halfway. This might be a problem if you have a lot of remote connections, a lot of extra or consuming things from different places. Then you kill the application, all these things might be hanging around, or they might be like half-baked. So you have some requests that went through to the remote processes or services, but some others didn't. So you have a faulty status that you could avoid just using the right commands in your MTA, right? This one I will just skip because we have seen telemetry all day long, right? So just use the package, just use the plugin, super easy, npm install, that's it, nothing else to be done. Maybe you want to configure where you're going to have, if it's cloud login, if it's Dynatrace. So you do some configuration, otherwise it's going to be the default in the console when you are just testing. But yeah, just use, it's there. Oh, go ahead. So yeah, it's free, it's available, use. Finding secrets. By default, again, defaults might be a problem when we go to production, right? It's nice to start with, it's nice to learn because it makes everything simpler. I don't need to understand a lot of things. I just create, everything works. Then by default, the secrets that we have in the services in BTP, they're going to be instance-based, which means if I have a secret for my access, UAA, whatever that I have created to my application, everything that I bind to that service is going to share the same secrets. So if somebody stole the secret, gets the token, they can use that for all these different services. So using binding secret, which is just a configuration, no code whatsoever, you are going to have a secret per binding. So every new binding that you have in the application, or in the service instance, it's going to get its own secret. So it's safer, right? This one is more for at the end of the spectrum in your DevOps. So everything else was like deploying. I'm as a developer, I wrote all my code and then I just throw the code over, and then the basis or whoever is going to take over and deploy and run all the things on BTP. They are going to face all those issues with the deployment. And this could be something that could help you, especially if you're publishing packages out there, right? And sharing stuff. It could be in the public one, it could be a private NPM that you have. But using NPM Provenance, it makes the link between the CI/CD pipeline that has published the package, and then you can see some badges and some links in NPM page for that package. So it guarantees that that build or that version that we're getting from NPM repo, it's getting from whatever CI/CD pipeline that has created and deployed that package. So you have that traceability that you can click on the link, and this is going to take, in that case, is going to take you to the GitHub action that has created or published that package. So you have this more on the security layer, and but also in traceability. Maybe you have some issues inside that package. Remember the package that I mentioned, the HDI deployer one? If people had this one, they could click on this link and see exactly how and where that package has been built and published. So they could have that trace and see from where the issue was coming from, at least where that has been published. So this also avoids one problem, that it's somebody taking over the package or tokens that you have and publishing new packages from their local machines. So this has to be from a CI/CD pipeline service that has this sort of configuration. So today I think it's just GitHub out of the box and GitLab with some weird code. And then this is super easy. So you just need to npm publish as you do like everybody else, right? And then you just -- provenance. That's it, nothing else. But it has to be from within your CI/CD pipeline, right? Super easy, also free, no need to pay. This one is more on the DevSecOps stuff. So this doesn't do anything with the application, doesn't do anything with deployment or if your CI/CD pipeline, but it helps if you want to understand the license usage inside that, let's say, application that you have. So this is a standard, and the first one is an ISO, the other one is just a de facto standard. This helps you understand the dependency tree inside your application. And this is because it's a standard, it's not a package lock, but it's kinda a package lock where you can understand everything that you are using in the application, right? Because it's a standard, it's the same for Java, C#, PHP, Node.js, maybe ABAP if somebody wants to create a plugin for that. But it's generic, right? So if you have a pen test company testing your applications, or if you have a security team doing this, you could just give them that file, right? And you give them, and they would understand, and they would run whatever tools they have to understand the dependency tree inside your application. So you don't need to provide codes. You don't need to give access to the code. You just give the list of the dependency. It's a standard. It can run, and there are a lot of applications out there to read this format and get some information for you. For open source stuff is really good because it can read all the licenses that you have in the dependency and may tell you that you have some issues with the licenses because you are building something that's not compatible with the license that you have. For example, you have some MIT very open license, and then you are trying to use some very restrictive BSL, whatever version, that's not compatible. This is the last one. So quite simple. I think we are on time. We have questions.
I don't know if the session was an answer to most questions that are possible, but are there questions? We can take a minute. No, you will get the slides. That's the
Yes.
thing.
Yeah, and
So
some
the
links,
handbook.
some links at the end.
And then I want to say thank you so much, Mauricio.
Thank you.
Go follow him on LinkedIn so he gets more followers than Christian Klein. And now we have a closing session in the Audimax. So I would all invite you and beg you to go back there. And after that, dinner, music, games, asking Mauricio questions.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I like
Some from Delaware.